The first example I'm going to put out there of it, how it's been done well, is Moana, Disney, where
Yeah.
where it's not as obvious, and obviously that's not the central point of the character, if you get what I'm saying. So like, have there been any that you've seen? It can be from the past, it can be recent.
Probably an obvious one, but it's one that as I've gotten older and rewatched it, it's become apparent where it's not as good as being Pocahontas.
Oh yeah. Everyone loves it, but it's
that's a great example.
Yeah.
And she
No, you got to elaborate. Why your opinion on that? Why do you say such a thing?
I think it's just more a case of, as a kid, you're obviously into it because it's animated and it's musical and all that magical stuff. But as I've gotten older, it's become a bit more apparent that it's a bit. I'm trying to find the right way to word it. I'm sorry, I'm struggling a little.
I agree with you. I just want to know how you're gonna put it, because you're probably gonna say something not more harsh, but I've got quite a harsh opinion on this film.
Yeah, it's like I still find it an enjoyable film, but it's a bit more. There's a word I'm trying to find, and it's just not coming to me.
It's a specific kind of thing, isn't it?
Yeah. Well,
I also agree with you. My example, while not, let me just go with it. It's Van Helsing, the one with Hugh Jackman. Have any of you heard of that one?
I've heard of it, not seen it.
Yeah,
I haven't seen it either.
I like the film.
Sorry, I glitched there. Have you guys heard of the legend of Van Helsing outside of the movie? The idea behind
vaguely.
Yeah, like the whole.
Well, essentially, he's a myth killer. So a bounty hunter that tracks like werewolves, vampires, Frankenstein's monster, that kind of thing. Like in that type of world, he is the champion for people and protecting people who are being ravaged by these werewolves, vampires, XYZ. So, but there's a movie with Hugh Jackman in it called Van Helsing. Well, let me be clear. I enjoyed the movie when I was a kid. Love it. I'll still watch it. It's very cheesy, but I'll still watch it. But here's where it's where I think it was done poorly. It comes off very Western-like. You have this, you have this entity that comes into these very foreign, towns, countries that, hey, look, Dracula exists over here. That's where he was born. Da 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 da. But you come in here gunslinging, shooting arrows, and tearing down. It's who. Do you have the right to do that? Yes, you're coming in as a savior, right? But really, you have to. I mean, in my opinion, you have to teach a village to fish.
Yeah,
if that makes sense, right? Because the problem's going to come back at some point. You can't be there forever. I think that's the problem I had with it.
Yeah. So I get what you're saying, kind of like that's the way things are done there. Like, what gives you the right to go in and kind of overturn the whole... It's almost like their own society. And just because it's fiction, we often like overlook that part of things. Like, and that's why I wanted to like bring this up as a trope. Because in Pocahontas, it's a bit more direct as well. Right, it's kind of like, oh wait, these are defined as like the civilized people are seen as evil, bad, like, but they don't have the information either. But they're not afforded the same kind of grace. And then obviously Pocahontas and their tribe is seen as the wise. And
I took it differently. I disagree with you. Pocahontas, if I looking at it with an unbiased lens, I would say those entities exist on both sides. The good-natured people,
you're
and,
right,
and the savages.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? There's definitely some people that were like, "Hey, I just wanted to meet you. coming off these ships, right? And you're like, can I shake your hand? This is our custom, but I can do your custom. I can kneel if you like.
Yeah.
There's those people. But then you got the people that are like, hey, cut them down if they look at you weird. You know, keep moving. We're looking for something. Both. And honestly, you need both sides. You need those people who are hesitant to be as nice, right? Definitely. Hey, we'll allow you to mess up first, but at what cost to your own people? That's kind of how it is, especially when you're, I wouldn't call it colonizing on the first meet, right?
Yeah.
When you decided to stay and bring your people, then you changed it.
Yeah.
Of course.
But it feeds into the whole, like, the greedy Europeans thing. Like, it makes it a lot more obvious, I felt. And it's just like, there are better ways of portraying that, where it's a bit more nuanced. Because like you said, you're not wrong. There are characters on both sides where you're questioning their motivations. But I just think it's so overt. And obviously, because we probably saw this when we were children, we don't necessarily pick up on just how clear-cut it was. Like, oh, these are the bad guys. These are the good guys. But it's like, wait, hold on.
It's all whimsical.
Yeah. And it's like you said, Lewis, seeing it as you get older, you're going to look back on it like, wait a minute. This is kind of like heavily political.
You got to read a history book. You got to read a history book and see what actually happened. But Nissa, go ahead. You were going to say something?
I think history is indeed the most, what do I say, manipulated thing, and it is manipulated. We all have every aspect of history. I might know things that you might not know, and you might know things that I might not know. There, as Plato said, it is false, and we must not agree with. But everything is, we must use our head
and communicate. That's the biggest culprit right there, is that we can't communicate with one another right out of the gate, which makes us cautious or overly cautious, right? Fight or flight, because we don't know, and when our expectation is that we get to go home tonight, but that's not always promised.
And I think you touched on a issue there with the manipulation of history, because it's like it borders on propaganda in some ways. And it's like you question.
But that's.
I get what you're both saying, like both good points. But with Pocahontas, I just feel it was so obvious who you were meant to root for, and I don't always think it's great in a story. I preferred questioning both sides and then having some kind of contrast where I look back and think, oh wait, they had some good points, but so did they. I prefer.
Well, keep in mind, again, it was a children's movie, right? And so I related to another children's movie, El Dorado. If you guys have seen that one, very similar approach, except they show you who the enemy is on both sides.
Right.
That's why I referenced that. They on both sides, when you have the native indigenous tribes versus the colonizers that come, and at the time they're not colonizers, right? The new arrivals. Mm-hmm. But guess what? They already have new arrivals. There are two people who just snuck onto this island. You're right. So that's the same side. They come from a civilized world. And so, but also you have this evil kind of witch doctor that's native, indigenous, and he is pulling everyone's string. He wants things done his way. He's all into sacrifice, ritual sacrifice, da-da-da-da-da. So you see both sides really playing a transaction against each other. And I love that, because as an adult, you get to really unpack that bag as opposed to just following the story.
Yeah.
Whereas Pocahontas, I feel like it's way more deep, because they that's Disney. They intend it to be, you have to unpack that bag for generations to come. That's my 2 cents on that.
No, and you're right. And sorry, Nisa, were you going to go then?
I was going to say that this is because of how things have evolved in this century in modernism. If we go back to medieval era, in those places we can see how there was just one good side and one bad side. There wasn't 3D or multi-dimensional characters at all. They describe things as someone is good and someone is bad. There is nothing good in the bad person, and there is nothing bad in a good person. We have evolved to a point that we are showing our children, our audience, that there is inside a good person inside a bad person. Not a bad person, but we might do things that are bad, might do things that are good.
Yeah.
We do have that. And it's a very good thing to show in movies and in books as well.
Yeah, it's important how it's handled as well, because, you know, you can feed into the stereotypes of certain groups, and then obviously that can be harmful the longer it's left to go on, and then, you know, you get to, and again, like we said, it's a kids, Pocahontas is a kids show, kids film, so it's like you get that from earlier, like probably 7 and under.
Yeah.
I wanted to say one thing, Nissa. You said something that really inspired me to remember a quote that I still love, and I think I've already quoted it before, but it's from the movie Seven, which is an animated movie, and it's like these sock puppets things that are animated and they move around. If you've ever recalled that, but it's called actually it's not called Seven. Sorry, it's called Nine. Have you guys seen that one?
What year was that?
I haven't seen it. I know which one you're on about, but I've not actually
2009.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, I always get this wrong. So it's called Nine. It came out in 2009. It's a sci-fi fantasy. It's like an hour long. And it's set like in a 1940s alternative version where these rag dolls that are labeled with numbers are animated. They're moving around this post-apocalyptic world that was left by humans. Like humans are no longer. We're gone from this earth. But these rag dolls, they move around this earth.
Yeah.
But anyways, from this movie, there's a quote that I love, and it says, "Sometimes fear is the appropriate response." And so I tie that back to every response your body is capable of feeling. Sometimes it's the correct response. You just have to determine, you know, why you felt that way, you know, down the line. And for example, as far as the betrayal that we're talking about, right? That happened in all of these movies. In that sense, you have to know what it feels like to be betrayed sometimes. And sometimes you have to be betrayed. If that makes sense. To really
to know the difference. I get what you're saying.
To know the difference. Because you know that some people need that. Some people need that to know not to do that to others.
Yeah, true.
Kind of like a switch. It's like, whoa, I didn't like that. I can't do that to someone else. Or some people say, hey, that was done to me, I'm gonna do it to somebody else.
So I think that makes it that's why it can be such a harmful trope as well, because it's kind of like that's a lot of responsibility that comes with that, being able to identify the correct response. Because some would say they're doing things out of fear, but that could mean like wiping out a whole society of people, and they could feel justified in that because they're feeling fear. So I think that's a good point. Actually, it brings up the responsibility that comes with identifying the correct response. And it brings me on to my next question as well. So as readers, does it take you out of a story at all to see a character that's so stereotypical and just like a plot device, or can you kind of like read around it or get past it if there's an interesting enough plot?
I think I can read around it, but only I think it really in a way I think it depends on the genre, because I think if we're talking like if this is someone that's so stereotypical but in a comedy way, I find if it's done right, you can look around it. But if it's like a more serious film, I find it can be quite distracting.
Yeah.
And I guess in the thriller genre, especially in the psychological thriller genre, we come across characters which are multi-layered again. And of course, we go back when we are exposed to the villain, who is particularly the villain. We go back, we are being told how he became the thing he is now, how he became the person, what made him, what pushed him to do something bad. It is mostly an abusive childhood, an abusive father or an abusive mother, or some event in his life that moved him to do something bad. But of course, a bad thing is always a bad thing. We can't justify it, but it gives us some story of how a person is bad who does something bad.
Yeah.
The only, and maybe it's just a word choice, subjective word choice that I disagree with, but I do disagree with what you said about justifying it. And people, like, I think everyone tries to justify something that they do out of character, right? And I want to answer your question too, Carmine. Has anyone seen the movie The Salvation? 2014. Do you know the actors Mads Mikkelsen?
Yeah.
Ava Green. Okay, so 2014. This movie is a Western, 1870s, and it's a Danish film. It's a Danish Western.
Yeah.
And so Mads Mikkelsen, he plays this foreigner, right? Comes to the West here in the States in the 1870s, and he's there for 7 years doing hard labor, trying to get his family over here, right? That story has been done how many times? Okay, and so when they're so he saves up enough money, family, brings them there, and that's how the story starts. It's just like, finally did it. They came, and he's just like, look what I did for you. I built this house. I did all these things. Like, we're going to live a whole life. America's completely different than where we came from. What happens? Brutal. His family is savagely murdered, like immediately, right? Because of XYZ. He flips a switch. He was a very stern but hard-working man, kept to himself, didn't do anything, and then he just flipped the switch. And he went after those individuals. And he was no longer the steadfast, initial protagonist that you're like, oh, I like this guy. I like this hardworking father figure. Now he becomes this villain.
Yeah.
And it goes straight left where he is just savage.
Yeah.
And it's justified, right? Like, you're like, nah, look what they did to his family.
But,
and he just takes it to a whole nother level with them, right? So, but that's the movie, and that's the case.
Well, I was just gonna say to that, is it justified? Because if the people he's harming are innocent, then because if his revenge is with America as a concept, some people are gonna get swept up in that weren't involved.
Facts.
So,
that's called collateral damage.
Yeah. And I don't think
I'm not saying that's good, but yes, you're correct.
I was gonna say, we can't really. Is that a justification? It's terrible that
I'm not saying it's a good justification or a bad justification, but it is a justification.
Yeah,
that's correct. The one he's using. No, because that is an interesting.
Well, and even then, you can't even say that. That's the thing that's driving him. Yeah. I don't even use because using interprets that he was cognitive of what he was doing. Some people are not. Some people are literally on autopilot. And we've all been in that mode.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like John Wick in a way, isn't it?
Yeah. But that, when you think about it, the same thing with military, vets and PTSD, right? Yeah. If you're trained to do something for over a long period of time, your body naturally knows how to do that thing.
Yeah.
In their sleep, especially if you're trained to know how to do that thing in your sleep.
Yeah.
It's very hard to turn the switch off. And if it's on, dude, how are you held accountable for the thing that you didn't trigger, right? I didn't teach myself how to do that. I didn't trigger myself. Am I held accountable for my actions? Yes. The world says yes, I'm to be held accountable. But depending on how I'm held accountable, maybe I'm just confined and drugged for the rest of my life, or in prison for the rest of my life, or whatever it is.
Yeah. So is what we're discussing here morality then? Would you say? Is that the argument here? Is it the scale of morality? Because I agree with what you're saying, you're hired by your country to protect and serve, you're following orders, you're doing certain things. Again, the consequences of that, the PTSD and, seeing your friends.
I think class comes into play, because if you have one class that is revered over the other, for some reason you might have more opportunities to avoid something you don't want to do.
Right.
That's how it's always been.
Right. And I think the breakdown is when you have someone from outside of that coming into the society where that's the norm. And
yep.
And then they decide this is evil, this is wrong. And then they're going to take matters into their own hands.
Or that this just is not how it's done in the world.
Yeah.
And yeah, in your small town, it is. But dude, I'm gonna expose what you're doing and show your people the world. Yeah. And some people are like, "How dare you?" That's like breaking up a cult.
True. And then there's an argument there for that being the right thing to do. It's a tricky one, isn't it? Because again, it's like it depends on where you lie in terms of morality. Like if killing's wrong completely, then doing that for any reason it's murder.
Okay. I think if he isn't playing Robin Hood, then it's obviously not. It can't be justified. Killing an innocent person who isn't related to any harm that you have been caused is injustice, of course. If we talk about the series, if you have seen it on Netflix, the last season was played, I guess, here. So people tried justifying Joe, the main character of the series. Bad things happened to him when he was a child, but of course he did a series of murders, and I think none of them were to be justified, and he should have been in jail sooner. Mm-hmm. So yeah, if a person isn't playing Robin Hood, he is supposed to be behind the bars.
So you agree with Robin Hood?
Yeah. I guess if he is playing Robin Hood, if he's killing the bad guys, I won't say that it is a good thing. I won't promote that. But, yeah, if he is doing something good, then he's good. If he's killing somebody, taking someone's life, it can't be justified either way.
That's why I'm like, are we really talking about morality here? Because again, it's like we assume like, oh yeah, he's killing the bad guys, but it's like that guy also has a family that's not involved. Yeah. So it's like he's lost his life, but he still has maybe a wife, children, and they're gonna want revenge. So have you just created a cycle where this is gonna happen and you're gonna have someone coming after you in a few years?
Then I would change my answer. Sorry, Nessa, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, you can go. I just wanted to say that if this cycle is not going to stop, if I kill somebody, even if he's bad, as he said, his family is innocent, they are going to take revenge, and this will go on. Cycle won't stop.
Yeah. What were you going to add to that, Emma, Remy?
Yeah, I was gonna change my initial answer. Before I said it was class, right? And now, after what I'm hearing, I think it's more intelligence. I think that's what it is. And I say that because why is it so black and white for us? It's like a matter of, well, if they killed or not, right? If they killed, that's because they chose a very singular path. They explored none of the endless other paths that were probably available to them in that moment.
That's true.
Because that's how life works. And maybe they didn't choose a different path because they couldn't, rationalize their feelings in time to prevent their body going into autopilot and making a bad decision.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So I'm thinking it comes down to, if you don't have the tools to, if you don't have the tools and have used it to hone your control over yourself, then yeah, it's an intelligence thing. You just haven't reached that level of, I would say, awareness of yourself.
Yeah. No, you're right, because there are a lot of steps before you get to murder.
Right? And Brandon's like, what are y'all talking about?
What have I just come into? It's a case of intelligence, of knowing there's multiple steps before you get to something so extreme.
Mm-hmm.
And like the theme of this discussion is about the magical natives, the noble savage, So the example we were speaking about before was Pocahontas versus a Moana. And why? Do you have any opinions on those two before we move on to the next question?
On the moral standard, or moral, or Pocahontas and Moana?
Well, blend the two if you're comfortable to do that.
I mean, and I look at those stories a little differently based on my experiences, especially with in perspective to the native girl in both of those instances, in Pocahontas and Moana, essentially coming in to be saved by an outsider in those cases, and then essentially that outsider throwing conflict within that particular tribe or community.
Yeah.
And now Pocahontas, Moana, and I'm not as familiar with Moana as I am with Pocahontas. So, but I'm assuming it's probably the same trope, essentially. But that outsider throwing that wrench into, or that conflict into that group or that community, and now one person's taking the other side, where someone who's more of a traditionalist, right, within that group is now seen as in the context of the story, that person is seen as now the bad guy.
Yeah.
Person. However, if you look at the history of the group or the organization or whatever, the community, that person is the person that has held that group together and kept them in a good position over the last couple of years, or throughout their history. And now all of a sudden, because they're not they're not per se down with the outsider coming in and throwing in or opening up the group or the community, they're now seen as that bad guy. And then you can go further down in history, and then all of a sudden that community ends up devolving. But that's a whole different conversation. But so that's really my context around those two characters,
yeah,
in particular. And honestly, that whole storyline, which has happened several different iterations, whether it's Pocahontas, Moana.
Mm-hmm.
I watched a movie with Leonardo DiCaprio a couple of years ago about the flower moon. I can't remember the name of it, but it's the same storyline.
Mm-hmm.
It's all these different areas, and you kind of see the same thing. So
yeah. Okay, so that brings me on to my next question. I'm going to open this up to the floor. What do you think is the difference between an inappropriate representation that's like a stereotype, and like a tasteful appropriation of a different culture?
So what makes it inappropriate versus what makes it respectful?
Yeah.
For me, it would be if I learn something new, right, about this culture or whatever, if you made it up, this new world that you built, whatever, if I learned something from it, I think that's done successfully, and I think that's done respectfully, especially if I learn that it's actually based off of a religion that I knew nothing about.
Yeah.
It's a dead religion, right, that someone found in some archive and they brought it to life in a story. To me, that is respectful, because it would never have lived past where you found it if you hadn't have taken that story and allowed it to breathe, in my opinion, right? But now you have maybe this subject matter has a new viewers, new audience, just because they took it a step further. It could just be one person, but they read something, they Googled it or whatever, and then they followed that rabbit hole, and now they're like in it.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. I think as long as it again, for me, I'm going off the vibes.
Going off the vibes.
I'm gonna say, as long as it doesn't feel like a caricature, I can kind of look past the, like, as long as it's not really, really obvious, I can at least watch it. Like, I might be like, hold on, after like the second watch, but as long as the first one, as long as I don't get that feeling, I can kind of, like, to me, that's how I judge it based on how I feel consuming the content.
Yeah, I agree with you on that, Carmine. As long as it's respectful to that culture, and it's not being overt in a disrespectful way to the culture. I mean, as things were, a lot of times in the past, things have kind of changed as we've grown as a society and a world in general. But as long as it's respectful and it's honest about what that culture really is, and again, not playing up to the especially the negative stereotypes of whatever culture you're going into and trying to explain and or trying to convey to the audience. Obviously, those negative aspects of the culture do exist, but you can't make it the main piece of it. Of the conversation or the explanation of it.
Yeah, that's a better explanation of what I was trying to say, because it's the intentionality of, like, what are they choosing from the culture? So, like, for example, if it's a culture that just eats animals for whatever reason, like just raw, kills animals.
Yeah.
If that's what they choose to highlight, then there's a little bit of a problem there. It's like they've probably got a rich history, a lot of other things going on, and the author,
you want to know the why.
Yeah, the author. Why did you pick that? Like, out of all their history, why that part?
See, you want to learn, right?
Yeah, and you summed it up even better. It's the learning process.
But Louis, Nissa, I'm sorry, I'm terrible jumping in, but Brandon and Carmine, they said something that I want to respond to, and I'll say this. You both use words that are very subjective. Simple. Respect, don't like
True.
this, taboo. Those are all subjective. And I say all that to say this. The reason behind what people do, right? It might make sense to them. It might not be, if you're thinking it's taboo, that's because the masses have considered it taboo.
Right.
They collectively, someone has said, or a group has said, hey, we don't like that. Right. And so now you're like, I got to stay away from that. Go ahead.
Go on, Nisa.
I think whatever group has decided, as he said, they are the privileged people who are being respected. If I would say some of us people, as Pakistani people, who are being portrayed negatively, I might sound a bit controversial, but I guess that is the truth. We are being portrayed according to our religion, which is a major part of what we are, but we are being portrayed badly. There is a big stereotype based on us, and I guess some of the respected nations, or the people who people look at for inspirations and all, they have decided that this certain nation and these certain people aren't good. They are not educated enough, or they aren't more intelligent, as we were colonized at a few hundred years ago. So yeah, we still come under, I guess, what people perceive us. We are uncivilized, as I must say. So that is not the truth. And what I have seen in movies, especially in movies, we are being portrayed for a stereotype as some people who are oppressed from our men. That isn't the truth. That is the biggest thing I have seen on cinema and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See, awareness, authenticity, portraying it as it is.
No, that's a fair assessment, because it's kind of deeper as well, isn't it? Like when it's a whole country of people, because it's like the representations of those people. That might be all someone sees of a country like Pakistan. They might only see a film where they're portrayed that way, uncivilized, They're always the villains, this kind of thing. But we know there's nuance within that, and there are educated people. But like you said, Remy, earlier, it's about intelligence, because some people don't know the difference.
Of course.
All they need to see is one example of something negative, and then that's it forever. Like, their mind can't be changed.
Well, a good example of taboo, but also accepted in certain parts of the world is kind of like, marriage, and whether it's, with one spouse or more, or same sex or other, that whole concept right there of marriage is probably the biggest universal, I would say tether that we all share. Is that we have to encounter that in our own communities, no matter where you grow up. Sometimes you got to toe the line in certain parts of your family with who you bring around, right? Yeah. Think about that. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you're like, you grow to a point to where you're like, don't care, cut them off. Now you just cut your family off for your new family.
Yeah.
Right? And that's what you're saying, Brandon. It's like at a certain point, it's how you use the right word. You go from a tribe to individuals. And you don't want that, right? You want to keep the community, but if the community if they don't update their ways, which is also seen as taboo sometimes in certain communities, if certain ways aren't updated, if certain things aren't accepted, because hey, my grandchild likes to wear makeup, dude. I'm sorry, I don't know what to do. I still love him. You know what I mean? It's like, what do I do? So I don't know. It's subjective.
It's quite divisive as well, isn't it? What did you think about that, Lewis?
I think that's a good point. And just kind of take it in a different direction slightly. I think going back to what we said about being educated, I think that it reminded me of a movie that I've not actually seen that I think it's just come out, I Swear, which I don't know. I don't know.
Is that this year?
It's about a guy with Tourette's syndrome. And one line from the trailer that this is just really bringing back to me is when he's talking to, I don't know who he is he's talking to, but he says that he doesn't think the problem is Tourette's syndrome. The problem is that not enough people know about it. Right. And that just really struck a chord here because, like you say, sometimes you go into these without knowing anything about the culture, about their ways. You only know what you've been told. And sometimes you'll see things in different representations that are different to what you've been told, and it's up to you to figure out which is the real representation, which is the truth, which is how it actually is.
Well said, sir.
That's true, because it is that case of remembering the person you're speaking to is an individual. They can't take on the responsibility for a whole nation of people and their opinions, and even with that, there's other dynamics at play that we're not always privy to. So there's been a few good points there. Is there anyone else that wants to add any notes before I move on to the next question? Okay, so for the next question, let's get practical. So for the creatives out there that are dealing with these topics and they're trying to create these characters, like we've highlighted, some of them might not have the knowledge yet to create a 3D representation of a certain culture. So I just want to open up to the panel for everyone to just give a line or two of how they can avoid falling into the trap of creating a caricature. Something practical a writer could use.
The thing that has been going on for hundreds of years is appearances. If we go back to the medieval era, as I have mentioned before, people were dressed as their personalities to show. In today's, people were dressed, if a person is innocent, they were being dressed as in white gowns and white clothes, and if a person was bad or cruel, they would be dressed in black or red. Coming to this part, what I have seen across my nation, if a girl or a person is innocent, they are being dressed as in Eastern wear, they have a little amount of makeup, and they are shown as very pure. And if a person is, bad or whatever, they are being dressed as Western in Western clothes. So this kind of thing portrayal is very black and white.
Yeah.
What we must do is make characters 3D, as you said. We should, go beyond those appearances and don't judge. We don't have to judge them as they are being shown. We have to see beyond them, beyond the things, and listen to what they say and how the characters are it.
Yeah. So avoiding the appearance trap.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think in order to understand, especially if you're not familiar with a culture and you're trying to represent them, I think it's important. And again, I think we've started moving towards this in current times more than we have in the past. Is getting actual consultation from someone who is relevant in that culture, so they're not. So you're not going off of old information, right? Like, for example, if you're representing the African American culture and you're only a point of perspective of Boys in the Hood, as opposed to but you're representing them in 2025, but you're using the Boys in the Hood representation. You're calling someone Pookie. I don't know anybody who uses the name, right? So, but you're calling them Pookie in 2025, right? So going into someone who is actually relevant in that culture in this day and time, if you're representing them here in this time, getting that actual conversation so you can really understand it. You're not going off of old information. But if you are representing something that is in 1990 and there is a Pookie involved, actually doing some research, right? And really getting some real understanding of, what Pookie would be like at that point in time, right? As opposed to, Pookie saying, hubba bubba dubba in the conversation. No, that's not how Pookie talk, right?
Yeah.
So getting that actual, getting some real context, depending on the point in time in which you're trying to represent that person and giving some real context on it, as opposed to just going, oh, well, that's what it's supposed to sound like. I don't know how much you guys watch. I mean, a cartoon that I watch with my kids all the time right now is Teen Titans Go. I'm not sure if you guys.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that.
You're familiar with Teen Titans Go, and one thing I really respect about that cartoon, it's not just the cultural references and that they have, but it seems like they really do their research and when they're trying to represent whatever piece, and they make fun of some of the caricature aspects of it too. Yeah. But they also do their research on it. So I really do, like a cartoon or something like that actually does. It seems like they do their research in those specific areas.
Yeah, and Remy, Brandon, this is fresh in your mind as well because you've been through this process on your own book as well. So could you just shed some light on that as well?
Well, yeah, I was going to say, Brandon, hearing you speak, I want to say this. I think we've lost the ambassadors, those liaisons, those integrators, those people who can and are malleable when they're being introduced or walking into a new environment. That takes a lot of, that takes a very particular person being able to do that, right? But that exists in every culture.
Right.
And so I would say, if those people meet, it doesn't always matter that they have all of the subject matter experience that they need to communicate on behalf of who they represent. I would say, as long as they're able to get the people to the room, they're the strongest people in the room. If that makes sense. But it's their power, it's their, responsibility to be a good steward to make sure that the right people are in the room and they're just interpreting what those right people are saying about the subject matter that they should be representing.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? And I say that to say this. There's also, we mentioned cultures, but in every culture there's an intergenerational hurdle as well. You know, particularly in the Black culture, it's like look, I got to go into my family, and then sometimes I got to talk to my dad before I talk to my grandparents. Simple. I go to my dad because I'm like, hey, I gotta talk about this. What's the best approach?
Yeah.
How do I make it simple? You know, what do they want? What do they care about? You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I don't want to make it any harder to get the answer I need to move how I need to move. And inside my own family. That's how it is in every organization, I imagine, right?
Yeah.
So that's what I wanted to say, is that we've lost that integrator, that ambassador, those champions that are able to carry the message. I don't want to call them messengers, because I think the messenger is so undervalued. But if like that goes back to that comment about communication is key. So if you don't have that connector, the liaison, the ambassador, how are you going to be able to set up a point of communication?